Yeah, I got it all spiffy. Gosh dang it. Well, next.
Well, I didn't go crazy. It still looks like Indiana Jones' office from.
Indiana Jones. Hey, just as long as you know where everything's at.
Yeah,
that's all that matters.
My files.
All right, now we got people filing back in. All right, this is the last time, fellas and gals, if there's some gals out there, that we're going to make you go to a different door. So we'll just kind of do it this way. So you want to get started, Perry?
Sure thing.
Everybody hear Perry okay? Perry, go ahead and say, sing a tune or something. Everybody can hear.
I do have a couple of go-tos at karaoke. So.
Do you go-tos? I thought you were going to say you got a couple of go-to jokes. I was waiting to hear a joke.
No, I used to go there, but it's been a while. So
you're not that guy anymore? Okay. Yeah, Matt.
I was named after Perry Como. My mom wanted me to be a singer.
Oh, yeah. Boy, was she she's not disappointed, but boy, when she found out you know. All right, let's do this. Matt says you can hear you loud and clear. So we got about 4 eyeballs to start. Okay, so this is the 3rd episode. Again, we're back to our old roots, how we started this thing with Perry on the phone, and you get to stare at my ugly bearded face, this experiment in itself of my beard. But also, too, again, y'all out there understand that this is an experiment, this Facebook Live thing. Mr. Mark, what's going on, brother? Mark Bendenboom. So this is an experiment itself, and we kind of want to keep that flavor to this. Is last week, now I'm a week behind, just as a disclaimer, a week behind in getting the blog post out. So last week's where we talked about the actual experiment and swing evaluation. I tried late to put it out yesterday. I know Matt Layton was asking about it, what the actual experiment entailed of at home, what information you're gathering and how to do the swing evaluation so that you can bring that here about your hitter so that Perry and I can help troubleshoot and see what the hitter effectively needs to work on to help the numbers out, whether it's the ball exit speed or getting more accurate with the launch angle. So we can go over that a little bit more here next week, just to kind of take care of some business before we get into the actual video this week. But next week I will post with the cliff notes of the video, referencing different points in the video, so make it easier to kind of go through. It's going to be an hour, obviously, so some people don't have that time. So to be able to skip around if you need to, I'll do that on Wednesday. Try and get that out on Wednesday, and in that we'll have the how to do the swing eval at home, at least as descriptive as we can get, as specific as we can get, so that leaves no room for confusion, because we really want you guys and gals to do this and bring it in, because we want to kind of spread the message of, Perry and I were talking about this before we jumped on today, that we want people, I think, where I've been talking about bro science versus real science, so everybody's kind of aware that there's this pseudo science out there of hitting, and kind of has been the last 4 or 5 decades. But we're trying to bring the real science, being able to get people to create a better standard of measure for their hitters. So we now know what kind of the how and maybe the why, but we don't have a what. We don't know, okay, what do we do now to make sure in the form of swing experiments and the tinker and test and what we talked about last week, how you actually know that something that Perry or I are talking about hitting-wise mechanics is working or not, or somebody else that you may follow what they're saying, or it could be a local instructor telling your son or daughter to do this, and you're not seeing any results. And so we can now put metrics to that and see if it works or not. And Perry agrees, and we were talking about this is what's missing, I think, is the tangible stick your fingers in the wound of Christ type of thing where, hey, I can see I do this swing evaluation as a control, I make this change, and then the numbers get better. That's what's missing out there. And a lot of other instructors you probably follow out there are afraid to do something like this because it's going to disprove what they actually do. And Perry and I are actually okay with disproving what we do because we listen to data. We listen to the reasoning behind that data and the conclusions. And we're apt to change if you can give us the data or a better way of doing things. I mean, it'd be dumb for us not to not help hitters, or in Perry's case, maybe pitchers or whatever, to make the changes. So that's kind of, I want to get that business out of the way because we want to keep it as the scientific method flavor. Remember the idea of coming up with a question, having a hypothesis of how that whatever that question is, what you think how that experiment's going to go, collecting research and study, and then doing the actual physical experiment, so collecting the data and then coming to a conclusion. So we kind of want to wrap these talks in that, and that's kind of the thing. So before I get Perry on, I'm going to have Perry, we're going to rattle out some questions, some hitting questions that I get, and then to kind of seed the conversation, and then you guys go ahead and jump in with your questions from the questions, basically. I don't want to put you guys out and say, hey, do you have any questions for us? And then you're like, well I don't know. Unless you do, then put them up. But first question for Perry is, we were talking about this, so if you see me, I'm reading right now. So I sent out a survey to my readers and my email subscribers, and I have like over 750 responses. So we're just going to cherry pick some and just to see the conversation, and then you guys can come in with your own questions. But the first one is, so this is to Perry, making the teaching of the proper weight shift. Oh, actually, let me tell you what the question is. So the question I ask in the survey is, what is your number one single biggest challenge teaching hitters right now? So one of the responses I got is making the teaching of the proper weight shift in your swing easier and more understandable to the hitter. So what say you, Perry?
Wow, that's a good one, because in my opinion, that's one of the key elements in two things. One, if you don't get off your backside, if you spin on your back foot, if you squish bugs, if you over rotate and your focus is on rotation, and that backside never releases fully, a bunch of things happen. One is your back shoulder drops a tiny bit, and it causes you to be more underneath, which is what a lot of people are telling us to do right now. We want you to get to the bottom side of the ball. But what I find when I do studies at the big league level is you take a guy that does that, and it's nobody does that all the time, but there are a lot of guys that do that routinely, especially when they're just a tiny bit late. So a fastball middle, and a fastball middle up. Those guys will have as high as a 50 or 55% foul ball rate. And those foul balls are fouled straight back, meaning they're just a hair underneath it. And the second you look at someone who releases more frequently, that foul ball rate goes down pretty significantly. And so making solid contact is one of those things that comes as a result of that. But also power changes. When that release happens, there's an increase in exit velocity. I've never seen it any other way. Can't even tell you how many exit velocity tests I've done. It's way over 5,000. It's probably closer to 10,000. And it's always the same. If a player takes a bunch of swings and some of them are released and some of them are not, the ones that are released create more speed. So the way to get it done is, from my perspective, is to take the bat out of your hands is one way, and to do certain drills, certain movement patterns, where all you're thinking about is that one motion. Just, for example, if you're a right-handed hitter and a right-handed thrower, the action of that backside releasing, when you just throw comfortably, and you watch what the right foot does naturally. I'm not talking about a pitch, but just tossing the ball lightly, playing catch. What you'll see the right foot do most often, if they have good, decent throwing mechanics, is the right foot will push and turn at the same time. Push and turn at the same time. And when it does that, it's creating it's combining two forces, both for momentum and the rotation at the same time. And so anything that you can think of that will help get that back foot to do that action, and it's exactly the same as when you throw, precisely, in my opinion, at least at the very beginning stages. So have them take a throw, get that feel, and then put a bat in their right hand, the top hand, and have them pretend like they're swinging or throwing sidearm, like they're going to throw the bat. And then the back foot releases, or it doesn't. And this is the whole trick to teaching, in my opinion. Is when something doesn't work, you have certain players, and I'm going to say it's probably somewhere between 10 and 30% of the players I've ever worked with. You tell them to do something, you show it to them on video or live, and they can do it right now. Rachel Garcia was like that last year, right before the season. Ask her to do it, she sees it, okay, I got it, and then does it instantly. And now it's not part of her swing yet. She's got to make that part of the swing over time, but she's able to perform it right now. Some players are not. And so there's a bunch of different ways. I'm sure Joey has a bunch of methods as well. But for me, it depends on the learning mode, what kind of learner that player is. If they're visual, then typically they're going to see it and they're going to be okay with it. If they're like me, I'm kind of a feel player, and I've got to feel it a couple of times before I can like really wrap my head around it. And in order to feel it, you might have to trick the player into doing something that's uncomfortable, and in order for them to feel it for the first time. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but one of those ways would be the throwing motion. Another way is what we do with in the time training protocols is the step behind. That's one of them, where you're literally taking if you're a right-handed player, you take the right foot and it goes behind the left foot, like in a hopping motion, so that the front side stays closed, and then you fully release. So you're literally almost running off of the backside in order to get it to completely and utterly release, like over-exaggerating the backside fully releasing. And then there's another drill that I like a lot, and that's the top hand drill. I just got a brand new, really cool product sent to me that is a one-hand bat that you can hit live with, but it has the little clicking mechanism so you can tell when you're releasing. And when the release happens correctly, you don't even hear the click. It happens at the same time you hit the ball. Really, really very cool.
Yeah.
I'll talk about that at some point. But the idea is that the right foot and the right hand, if you're a right-handed player, is releasing at the same moment. Now, when you coordinate those two things together, it's just easier for players to get out of their own way. And this is a drill. It's not my swing, so therefore I'm comfortable enough to just try this new motion and see what it feels like. And once they get to that point where they can release the right foot and the right hand at the same time, not only will they hit soft toss and live BP with their top hand very, very consistently, they get a better sense of when all of that comes together. Their timing gets better as well. So those are three of the things that I would recommend. They work extremely well. I'm sure there's hundreds more. That's just a couple that I've focused on. I probably have 7 or 8 more if you really want to get into that deeper, but those are the ones that I would recommend out of the gate.
Right. Very, very cool. Yeah. And Jim Macarelli said the difference with throwing, though, as you know, is the weight ends up on the front foot, which is true. I think with both motions, pitching and hitting, you're going to have centripetal. You're going to have some combination of centripetal force, which is the rock on a string going in a circle. So that's a center seeking force. That force is seeking the center, which is the fingers pinching the rock, right, as you're swinging it in a circle. And then there's centrifugal forces where you're swinging that rock and then you let it go and it goes off in a tangent off the circle. So that's a center fleeing force. So you have a combination of those two forces acting on pitching and hitting. So in pitching, you're and correct me if I'm wrong, Perry, but pitching you're trying to get out more. With hitting, it's more of like it's almost like you're creating a barrier to the ball, like to create this. You got something, an object coming at you, and you're trying to create some force to move that object in an opposite direction. Versus pitching, you're just trying to throw an object forward, so you don't necessarily have to throw and then like you would hit. Maybe you're going to push backwards. Is that your thoughts too, Perry, on that? On Jim's comment?
Think about it. I mean, most of the time we think about throwing and pitching, where you're getting on your 100% onto your front foot and the back foot is completely off the ground, but you're throwing downhill. Imagine that you're throwing uphill. Imagine going the opposite direction and you're standing on the mound throwing to center field at 10 degrees in the air or a little higher. And now it's going to be slightly different, right? It's going to be harder to get off your backside, because I'm a big believer that you get completely off your backside and you are against your front leg. You're not on it, but you're against it.
Right.
So all the weight releases off the back and the front side locks out and catches it. But you never get to the point where the center of your body goes out over your front foot. That's probably what I think he means by that statement.
Yeah.
But I believe you get off completely off your right side.
Yeah, I agree too.
Now, not every player does it. But if you don't, this is one of those things. Don't take my word for it. Test it.
Yeah.
Go take 10 swings, stay on the back foot a little bit, and then take 10 swings and get off the back foot completely. Just that one change, one thing at a time. And look and see what happens to the net result of each of the balls that you swing at. The overall will get better, the contact will get better, the flight of the ball will get better, and the exit velocity will get better if the backside releases. And that's what I base 100% of everything I've ever done. When I first started, I started with this group of like 80 players that were travel ball kids, elite, really elite down in San Diego. I mean, there were a bunch of big leaguers, kids that were playing. Trevor Hoffman's kids and the Brett Boone's kids were playing on this travel organization. And I tested every single player. And to a person, every single one of them, when they started to release, went up in exit velocity. And so I did that all over the place, everywhere. I tested all kinds of different things and did it with big groups like that because I wanted to know the answer. And it always came out the same. That release, when you fully get all of the weight to go off of the backside into the front leg being locked out, that exit velocity goes up.
Right. And that's and with this scientific method, when we're talking about the scientific method, now of course there's bad science out there. You have one study that comes out says coffee's good for you, and then you get another study that comes out says coffee's bad for you. They do it with salt, they do it with sugar, they do it with all everything. So of course there's agendas behind science, but here's the key with the scientific method. And when you're tinkering and testing at home, here's the key: is that what you're doing is you can replicate it over and over. So science isn't perfect. Science, you're not going to get 100% definitive unless it's like gravity on Earth and you jump out of a plane. You're going to fall 100% of the time as long as you're on Earth, unless you got wings or you got some other thing that if you're naked and you're falling out of a plane, you're going to fall 100% of the time, right? That's not going to change. But when it comes to hitting and things like that, there are going to be times, like Perry says, where you're going to see guys not get off their backside, say like maybe a Barry Bonds or a Sadohara O or something like that, where when they swing, I mean, you're looking at that back foot and it's not coming off the ground. It's maybe not even coming off the toe or coming to the toe like most do. But here's the deal, and this was an article that I had read. This is a Bryce Harper article I had read. It was like Washington Post or something like that. They had a biomechanic guy. They interviewed a biomechanic guy to kind of talk about Bryce Harper, and they were the main premise of the article where they were talking about Bryce Harper, and this was like 3 or 4 years ago, where his back foot used to come off the ground. His left foot, is a lefty, used to come off the ground really, really high. He's since changed that. He's not quite as high. He's a little bit closer to the ground because I think that was screwing up his launch angles. But he's a little closer to the ground now. Still comes off the ground with that back foot. But in the article, what was interesting was that they asked the biomechanics guy to kind of analyze it, and he said this. He said something to the effect of that if you keep that back foot on the ground, like almost like a squishing bug type of thing, that hitter will transfer only 75% of his or her body weight into the ball, 75%. So for a 200-pounder, say like, I know Bryce Harper's more than that, but I'm not a math major, so 200 is a little easier for me to do the math on. That equates to 75% of 200 pounds is 150 pounds. So he's basically putting 150 pounds into impact, which is 50 pounds less than what he weighs. I know he weighs more than that, but again, I'm not a math major. The other side of the coin, he releases his backside, releases his back foot. He's putting 150%, 150, into the ball. That is 300 pounds into the ball. He only weighs 200, but he's putting 300 into the ball. And that is double what he was doing squishing the bug. That's double what he was doing. So this is a biomechanics guy explaining what the benefit to releasing the back foot is. And that's kind of,
can I add to that a little bit?
Yeah.
Early in my studies, we had a device that would measure bat speed and ball speed at the same time. And when you start to look at some players who have inefficiencies, and one of those is staying on the backside. The players that I had that would do that, I had one player that was at 98 bat speed. And I know that sounds crazy high because the thing we were using was measuring the end of the bat rather than the sweet spot like today's devices are. And what was happening was their exit speed was about 97, 96, 98. So it was about the same. And what I kept finding with efficiency at that point was guys were hitting it about 6 miles an hour harder whenever everything was right. And when a player swings with the weight on the backside, there's a timing issue too with when the maximum speed happens and where the maximum speed happens. And it moves back away from the ball pretty significantly when the weight stays on the backside.
Right.
In other words, when that releases perfectly, the max bat speed happens much closer to impact. And that's going to significantly influence how hard the ball is going to come off the bat.
Right, and that is, and we don't have to get. I kind of like where we're going with this topic. I got another thing that Jim kind of clarified. We'll get to, but also on the EV side. So if you got a swing that is more backside dominant, where there's a few that teach this out there, where it's, and I used to teach this until I learned a better way, but to get the barrel dumping in front of the catcher's glove, regardless of pitch depth. It doesn't matter if the ball's inside, down the middle, or away. And the same coach is also teaching this, keep the weight more on the backside. So the opposite of what Perry and I teach. And the problem with this, when pitchers get more EV efficient, now it might not happen in the next year or two, but in about 2 years, you're going to see at the lower levels, pitchers doing better with being EV efficient. So when they become EV efficient, the pitchers, the hitters, those hitters are going to struggle big time, because they're creating a big loop in their swing. So, many of you have a historian of baseball hitters in the past. You look at Hank Aaron, you look at Rod Carew, you look at, who was the other one we saw the other day? I don't know if it was Willie Stargell. Oh, Roberto Clemente. They're almost straight up and down. Back foot is coming off the ground a whole heck of a lot. It's coming vertically off the ground. Not saying that that's the right way or wrong way to do things, but man, they made that thing work. I don't know if they did it in spite of, but I wanted to go to Jim's clarification. So he said, I think the challenge with teaching kids this back foot release is we want them to stride and shift their weight forward, but we want them to finish with their weight back, not stay back throughout the swing, if that makes sense. Timing clearly affects the back foot. When of the time the backside releases and when late, often not. What do you think, Perry?
I may have a different answer to that. I think the only reason that the weight should end on the back foot is to get out of the batter's box.
Yeah.
And otherwise, I really don't believe that that's the way it should happen. That's just my personal application to that, because here's what happens. Player releases off the backside and then they fall back to their back foot. Ted Williams did it, Babe Ruth did it, but they got to the point where they released off the back foot and then fell backwards.
Right.
And as long as it keeps happening like that, there's nothing, because the ball's long gone by the time that happens. So it means nothing from a power standpoint or anything else. What it does, though, is it promotes being in that position. And what I found over lots of decades, more than I want to admit, of teaching, is that they release and fall back, release, fall back, and then they release a little less and they fall back sooner, and then they start to not release at all, and they're right back to the place where they were at before.
Yeah. And
so it leads to that spinning motion, and that would be my only critique of that. Not that it's a critique, really. It's not incorrect at all. It's just that I believe that it leads to that if you're not really diligent with making sure that they release first and then fall back.
Right. I agree. And one thing we talked about at the ABCA, Perry, I don't think you were there. I think I was talking to Jeremy Johnson and the neurosurgeon gentleman that we had a fun conversation with, which is kind of cool, was the idea, it's kind of before the swing happens, so it's stride. How do we control our hitters from not striding or from not overstriding, I guess? And one of the things that I use is we just use the belly button as a reference point, because that is the center mass of our body, is kind of the dissection between, or the intersection between the belly button and the middle of the side of the body. If you take those two lines and you intersect them, right, that's kind of the center mass. You see front flips, back flips, all that's the axis of rotation when acrobats and athletes like that are flipping. So what we do is we take the belly button and we'll do an experiment with the hitter. We'll say, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to, in your stride, I want you to, the first stride, I want you to stride with your and end up with your belly button over your front knee. So as they stride, they're trying to really, this is basically a lunge, right? This is the extreme on the lunge side. And then what we do is we'll go back the other way. So I'll say, okay, I want you to, because I want them to feel the extremes first, and then we start to kind of go into the middle. So then what I'll tell them is I'll say, okay, take the belly button, and I want it to end up behind your back knee. So they'll stride, basically kind of reaching out like they would a cat that's afraid the floor is going to give way, and they're going to end up with their belly button over their back knee. Kind of similar to what some of these people are teaching out there with this deep barrel dump and really keeping the weight on the back leg and, you know, one-footed swings and things like that. So then what we do is we start to fill in the middle, get them to feel different points of reference. So then what I'll say is, okay, I want you to keep the belly button in the center of your legs this time, in the center. So we'll have them stride, and then at landing, their belly button's right in the center, which is starting to get close to kind of where we want to be. I like to be slightly forward, and I know I think Jim agrees, unless he's changed a little bit. But so we'll get them to finish with the belly button in the center of the legs, or in the center of the knees. And then the next one will go halfway between center and too far, and then the next one will go halfway between not at all and in the middle. So the big one, I won't go to the back one, because you can go belly button inside the back knee. You can have them stride to that. And then the last one, which is kind of where I like my hitters to be, is stride with the belly button at landing to be behind the front knee. So you're going to get a little bit more of that shift forward, because if you think about it, when we walk, I base a lot of my stuff, the root of a lot of my stuff comes back to walking mechanics, locomotion, basic locomotion. So think about how we walk, right? We're walking forward, we're not going sideways, but even if you sidestepped, you were just kind of like sidestepping like that, you do the same thing. So what happens, generally speaking, and this is, you can trace this back to Tai Chi and the thousands of years the Chinese have done Tai Chi, is that before you move in a direction, you have to move the opposite direction first. So if I'm going to move to my left, I'm going to move to my right first. I'm going to shift my weight, and then I'm going to shift my weight one way to go the way I want to go. If I want to go to my right, I'm going to shift over my left leg before I shift forward. And in Tai Chi, it's really important that you don't get too much weight or not enough weight on one side so that you can get swept. Like if a martial artist is going to sweep your leg out from under you and put you off balance. So when we walk forward, we do a similar thing where that swing leg swings through, and as it starts to weight the ground, your weight starts to shift forward. So if you just experiment with walking and being aware of where your weight shift is happening and when it is not happening. It's the same principles. We don't want to do it too much. We don't want to stride too much and lunge. We don't want to not do it at all. We can be in the middle, or we can be slightly forward. I like to be slightly forward behind the front knee. Like what Perry's talking about here, is that you're shifting your weight against a braced front side, not over a braced front side, right? Would you agree with that, Perry?
Yeah, in fact, if you've ever seen the Hitting as a Guest video with Jay Bell way back when, we had these devices that I'm really bummed that they went away, but it was called a Reebok core board, and they were super sturdy, about maybe 24 inches by 18 inches wide or so, pretty big. And we would hit off of those. And when Jay was experimenting, because what we did was we tested his swing, and then we experimented with some things like what we're talking about. We looked at the data and decided on which movements needed maybe a little bit of nudge. And then we did some drills in order to do that. And one of those drills was using the core board, because if it's a wobble board and it kind of goes, it moves wherever you move. So if I go to the inside on my back leg, if I put my weight on the inside of that, it collapses, so that now I've created a downhill angle that my backside is going at. And then when I would stride, we would stride into the front side, and it's going to cave in also. So I'm hitting downhill, and my front side is uphill. And it allows you to be super violent at the bottom, and then make sure that your belly button would stay behind your front side, because it would be almost impossible to get out over it. It is possible, but you fall off the board. So it's a great feedback tool. You can use wedges to do it, where you've got one that's going down on your backside and the other one's going up. I've seen people do it on pitching mounds, where they got one going down, one going up. But the idea of it is basically the same. The core boards are better because they move with you. So when you load, they collapse a little bit and they move wherever you move. And it's very, very cool. But it's that same basic idea. That's another way to show how the backside releases, but yet it doesn't release it to a point where you get out over your front foot. You still stay behind that locked out front side.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. And Jim says, yes, I agree with Perry. Always hard to explain in writing. Exactly. And one more on that too is, again, experimenting, right? That's the flavor of Perry and my talks. We want to get you guys to understand, experiment and tinker and test. The best thing, or mostly everything. I'm reading a book by right now by Nassim Taleb, Anti-Fragile, and he talks about how most everything we've seen in the medical industry, technology, anything really hasn't been born of study and research. It's been born of tinker and testing. Just go back in history. All the aspirins and the what's the other, the fungi that ended up curing, you guys probably know what it is out there, I'll think about it, it'll pop into my head, but tinker and testing is the thing. So another thing you can do with what Perry's talking about, and he mentioned, like Mike Ryan, Fastball USA, some of you've probably seen his stuff. He's got a lot of cool stuff too. He's got where you're practicing the stride, like Perry said, where you're going down a mound, or you're going up the mound, or like Perry's saying with the core board, or you can use like a Bosu ball where you flip it over where the hard surface is on the ground and you have the bubble above, and you can have them stand with the back leg or back foot on that, trying to balance and do it. The more variations you give to a hitter, the better they get at figuring out what that balance point is to be able to release that backside. So tinker and test, use different things, throw different things at them, at your hitters, because that's where even the ones that don't seem as athletic or don't seem like they're going to get it as quickly, even those ones are going to get better at a lot of this kind of stuff. The more you throw at them, the more frames of reference they have, the better they can get it. And maybe one thing like a Bosu ball, one doesn't get, but the other one gets. But maybe that one that didn't get that, you put him on a core board and he gets it. Or maybe he gets it on striding uphill versus downhill on a mound. So you have to that's part of the teaching side of this. The teaching side isn't perfect. It's kind of like an art, and you have to try different things. Let's see. Jim said, I think it will be very helpful when Justin Stone or Driveline starts releasing some of the Vertec ground force plate data. Yeah, penicillin. There we go, Matt. Thank you, sir. It was penicillin I was trying to think of. Yeah, plate data would help. I know there's 3D hitting. They got some stuff too where they do some 3D hitting where they do force plate stuff. I know Perry's been talking. This doesn't really, I don't think it really pertains to what we're talking about right now on the weight shift, but Perry's talking about the K-vest. That's more of kind of like shoulders, pelvis, and how the sequence of that kind of goes. So Perry,
I'm going to do some stuff with University of Oregon softball as well. They've got a really cool biomechanics 3D system there, and we're going to play around with that a lot. But one of the things that I would warn about any of those tests, they're all cool. I love all the data. I love measurement of any way, shape, or form. But if it doesn't include the ball flight and the exit velocity, I don't even want to talk about it. Because how do you know which one of those 50 swings that you took? You can assume that one of them is efficient because the body movements work together. And I would love for it all to fit like that. And I actually do believe, coming from a golf background, that it does happen like that, where everything connects, and when it's just right, then you produce the maximum. When all the cylinders are firing perfectly is when you get the maximum amount of output. But when doing testing, if the exit velocity and the launch angle is not connected to it, it really bothers me that we can make any kind of conclusions based on that. Like, for example, the first thing that I ever did was with Jay Bell in public. And the reason I wanted to do that was because it's assumed that a guy at the big league level is at maximum efficiency. And we found out pretty quickly that his swing was not at maximum efficiency. We added 10 miles an hour. That's a crazy amount of miles per hour to add to a guy that's at the elite level. And all I'm saying is that if you were to do tests with him, assuming that he was at his max efficiency, and you drew a bunch of conclusions about the swing data that you were collecting, whether it was weight shift, whether it was whatever, I'm not sure that the conclusions are correct until you get to the point where you say, Josh Donaldson or Jay Bell or whoever it is, that's the swing that produced the right ball flight, and that's the swing that produced the hardest exit velocity. And that one, now let's look at the weight shift data on that, and now I'm on board. Until that happens, that's the thing that has always bothered me about some of those testing protocols, is they don't include that. And then it's a matter of whether it's happening off a tee or happening off live pitching, whether we can get that information off of all of that. So that's going to be the ultimate test, is to find out all of that data when you're actually putting apples to apples, comparing this player's, is he releasing off the backside or is he spinning on the backside? That the weight shift should be able to tell us that new device. I think there's a couple of them out there that are measuring that. But I will tell you this, there were some old tests done, and they got it, in my opinion, very, very wrong, because their conclusion was the more ground force I create by pushing down into the ground, the better. And I would throw that out wholeheartedly, because the swing that's going to produce that is not going to produce maximum exit velocity.
Right. Right, I agree with that. And again, getting to the essence of how we filter through this information. Like Perry said, Jay Bell, you'd think, because he's a major leaguer, that his swing is 100% effective or efficient. And a lot of times, they can always get better. Dr. Kelly Starrett, his website, mobilitywod.com, he's a PT, owned one of the first 100 CrossFit gyms. And he talks about, we make our athletes better. Our best athletes, our elite athletes, can always get better. And when you do a test like they were doing, where you got the T test that we talk about here, is just basically putting on the tee, taking 10 swings, ball exit speeding all 10 batted balls, getting the range, the highest, the lowest, and then the average, and then having the circular donut target that's 10 feet in front of the hitter. To where I don't think we explained last time that I got from Perry last night, we were talking with Taylor Gardner, is setting the bottom of the target to be at the bottom of the ball, basically, right, Perry?
Right.
Bottom of the ball.
You're at 0 degrees.
Dead
straight, you're at 0 degrees.
Yeah, if you hit it straight, you're at 0 degrees. So we're looking at 10 degrees, hitting it through the donut part of the circular donut. And so now when you take a change like releasing your backside, and you're practicing that, and you go, say you have a control swing eval, so you do it before you make that change, you see where everything's at, you see what the exit speeds are, what the ranges are, the average, and then you see where the kind of the plot graph or the scatter graph of where those balls are hit in relation to that target, that 10-degree target. So once you have that data as a control, now any changes you make going forward, which I suggest one change at a time, take maybe a week or two working on that change, and then retesting, and now see what changes have happened to the scatter graph. So where those balls now are going in relation to that target, that 10 degree angle target, and what the ball exit speeds are doing. So now if you look at it in that frame, you can take any hitter, doesn't matter, elite or not elite. You can take a 7-year-old, you can take a 33-year-old, do a control, do a change, and then do a retest a week or two later, and you can see if that one thing made a change. A good example of that, they didn't need to, I guess, do it would have been nice to have the launch angle data to see how consistent they were around the donut, but they just basically, I had one of my hitters, the dad, his son goes to school with my son, and he's got a daughter that's a freshman in high school, and she made the varsity softball team. Well, this off season, she did over-underload training, like what Perry talks about a lot, and I teach a lot too from Perry. And he just did over-underload training for 6 weeks, and they were ball exit speeding basically. So ball exit speeding or bat speed, something like that. I don't know if they were using the ZEP or what they were using, but they were capturing that basically. And they found after 6 weeks, she went from like a 55 to a 63 mile an hour ball exit speed. That was just the only change, no mechanical changes whatsoever. It was just overload and underload training. And that's a softball. Remember, that's a softball, not a baseball. So a little heavier of a ball. So about a 7 mile an hour change in 6 weeks with the softball is pretty dramatic. That might have been the difference between her playing varsity and playing JV. So that's the thing that we're trying to get you guys to kind of put your mind around is how do we the data that you're seeing, whether it's Driveline or Archart or whoever these guys are, whatever the data that you're seeing, you like Perry says, you got to track it back to, okay, how does that change if I apply more force to the ground, more ground reaction forces? How does that A, affect my exit velocity, and B, how does that affect my accuracy with where my balls are going, my batted balls are going in relation to that launch angle target? If it's affecting one but not the other, well, if it's affecting your ball exit speed, say, just saying, I don't know if it will or won't, but say if more ground reaction force increases your ball exit speed, but it makes you more erratic, makes your ball scatter more erratic around that target. Well, here's what's going to happen on the field for the most part, right? Ballpark is you're going to have an increase in power. You might hit some balls more hard, but the problem is you're probably going to strike out more. Average is going to go down. Your accuracy numbers are going to go down. Your power numbers might go up, but it depends on what your main operating system is. Do you want a power hitter that can't hit for power or hit for average? Do you want an average hitter that can't hit for power? Do you want both? Or do you want, like Perry and I, we both subscribe. I kind of subscribed when Perry told me what his operating system is dramatically driving up hard hit ball contact, because that means both things are happening. That means you're hitting the ball harder, and you're getting on time more often, and you're barreling that ball, hitting it on the sweet spot more often. So you're more accurate with that barrel, hitting that ball in the right spot. So you have to think, okay, what is my main objective with my hitters? What am I trying to do? Am I trying to decrease strikeouts? Because that swing, and I kind of wanted to allude to that earlier. Perry said something that brought the Joey Votto two-strike approach. I get that question a lot. So I'm going to have him go into that. But if it's to decrease strikeouts, if that's your main goal, if you hate strikeouts so much, because there's some of my readers, that's their thing. I hate strikeouts so much that we have a defensive swing. So what does that swing look like if that's your operating system when you're teaching your hitters? I'm going to decrease strikeouts at all costs. So what does that look like? So Perry, I want you to go into some of the changes that Joey Votto's done over, and I love the stats that you bring with that. So kind of talk about that a little bit.
Well, I'm going off memory, so don't quote me 100%. But the study that I did was based on, is it really worth it? And I let the readers basically, you can look at that on my blog at hittingasagust.com.
I'll link to that. I'll link to that in this article.
You might have to scroll down a bit, but it's the basic concept was, is it really worth it? And so what I looked at was batting average it was like at 187.
With two strikes. With two strikes.
His right. His hard hit ball rate went down dramatically to the point where his exit velocity was hovering in 0-2-1-2 count at about 70% of his max. And I think it went up a little bit with 2-2-3-2 counts. But by and large, in two-strike count, every one of his production numbers, on base percentage, every slugging percentage, everything went down literally 50%.
Comparing,
and some of them more than that.
Comparing apples to apples, right? 0-2 count or 1-2 count before the change and after the change.
Right.
Right.
Well, just know, in looking at what happened to his overall two-strike approach.
Oh, gotcha.
I didn't compare his old two-strike approach to the new one.
Oh, gotcha.
I just dove into his two-strike approach. Does this really make sense? To get rid of some strikeouts, is it worth it that your slugging percentage gets cut in half? And for me, the answer is not no, but hell no. I just can't get comfortable with that. But for someone like him, it just depends on what your overall thought process is. Would I ever tell him that it's a bad approach? No. But for me, personally, it doesn't make a lot of sense because I give up a lot. And one of the numbers that struck me that was so weird and like in my face, I looked at all of the fastballs that were in those two-strike counts. In the sweet part of the strike zone, middle in, middle, middle up, and up and in, where you would think that you would want to drive the ball. In his two-strike counts, the amount of baseballs that were either fouled off, taken, or swung on and hit weakly, or even that ended up in hit, there was a ridiculous amount of fastballs that were left on the table. Meaning, if you'd had a different approach, all of those pitches are balls you can hit out of the yard, or at least have a chance to do damage with, as opposed to taking those pitches and almost fouling them off on purpose, or just trying to put those balls in play and having them end up as foul balls a huge percentage of the time. To me, that was one of the biggest crimes about it, was all of the pitches, the really good pitches to hit, that went by the wayside as a result of a less aggressive approach. When I worked with Pena in 2009, his strikeouts went down 25% by completely eliminating the worry about striking out. And his strikeouts went down 25%, and his batting average went up 25%. And his two-strike approach went from like 085 to about 240.
Wow.
Which it doesn't sound like all that much, but it's almost triple his output with two strikes. And for me, it depends on the type of player that you are. I mean, this is totally a personal thing. But for my money, that the Votto approach didn't make very much sense because of everything that you left on the table. You gained some stuff, but you lost a lot more stuff. And so everybody has to decide about what their philosophy is on that. But for me, I want to do damage all the time. And if the only way that you're going to do damage is that you take the very best approach in all count. A two-strike approach against Roy Halladay, if you're a left-handed hitter, is actually very weird. And if you sit in the middle and he's got 6 pitches that are coming that look middle, but none of them are. They're all moving in on your hand or away and losing speed. And so if you take a typical approach of trying to sit in the middle, you're going to get beat on both ends. You're going to get beat inside and you're going to get beat outside, because that's just the nature of reactionary hitting. When you put yourself in a defensive mode, defensive mindset, you end up in the middle trying to hit pitches on both ends. And masterful pitching is not going to allow that to happen. It doesn't work out very well, at least not from my studies.
Right. Yeah, so I read an article, and it was funny because I think I talked to Perry after I read this article. So I had the connections that were already waiting for the conversation with Perry on this, with the Joey Votto approach. And I came to the same conclusion, where in the article it was saying, I think it kind of gave a foreshadowing when it interviewed Joey Votto. I think it was a Fangraphs article. Interviewed Joey Votto, and they asked him, what was your two-strike approach and what was the reasoning behind it? And I think the one thing he was trying to do was a couple of things. He was trying to cut down on the strikeouts, and he was also trying to, actually the main thing, he was just trying to increase his average. I think he was trying to get to 350 or 400 or whatever it was. And in order to do that, he ran the numbers, and he would have had to strike out like 50 times less in a season or 30 times less or whatever it was. So that became his operating system that season. So where do you go? Where do you go when you want to strike out less? Well, you go to your two-strike approach. So he does. I can't remember what the exact things. I know he chokes up. I know he's more on his backside, which is Perry. We kind of talked about in the beginning of this talk, where when you're more on your backside, it makes you more vulnerable to balls up and possibly balls in, because you're, like Perry said, I think you talked about the balls he fouled back that he shouldn't have fouled back. He should have put in play and shouldn't put him in play hard. So it always comes back to, what's your main operating system that you're teaching your hitters from? Is it, again, to decrease strikeouts? Is it to increase batting average? And that's kind of the main generalized view of it. Well, you're going to find and seek mechanics, approaches that are going to support whatever that operating system is. So what you just heard with Perry with Carlos Pena in 2009 was that this idea of hard hit contact, increasing the rate of hard hit contact. Again, it knocks over 2 and 3 dominoes: the EV, the effective velocity, or the ball exit speed domino, and the control, barrel control. Right, being able to hit the target a lot more often, or keeping your scatter more close instead of more scattered. And so that dropped his strikeouts 25%. Plus, it increased his average 25%. So he had a 50% increase in both of those combined. So people out there think that, well, if you increase your power, that your average has to come down and your power or your strikeouts have to go up. Well, that's not always the case. It depends on the operating system, what you're thinking. If it's a swing off your backside, don't release your backside, and it's to dump the barrel into the catcher's glove, to really turn and torque that barrel into the catcher's glove, creating a loopy type swing, yeah, when pitchers get more EV, you might get away with it now, but when pitchers get more EV efficient, those swings, you're going to see batting averages drop big time. I mean, one of the videos that kind of did it for me with Perry was his video that he did on Chris Davis. And when I do this post will not be next week, it'll be the next week. But when I do this post, I'll include these videos in the post. But he did it on Chris Davis of the Orioles, not the A's. The Orioles, who's been really terrible the last couple of years, and there's been reason, people say, oh, it's steroids. Oh, he actually one case I heard is he was on Ritalin, and they took it away because it was a banned substance. It was considered a PED basically for ADD or ADHD or whatever. Whatever the reason, Perry in this video talked about how everything is the prototypical dumping the barrel. That barrel path is the same barrel path, dumping the barrel into the zone right in front of the catcher's glove, regardless of pitches in, middle, or away. And so he showed in the video, and he can probably go into this a little bit more, but he talked about in the video of all the home runs, and I think, actually, you know what? I'll just let you talk about it because you got the numbers on that, or the quasi numbers than I do.
He literally hit one home run that season. I think it was it 53 homers that he hit?
Okay, so that was that one.
On an exit or on an effective velocity of 96 or higher. So basically every fastball that he hit had an EV of around 92 or less, meaning they're down and away, they're down and middle, and that was the primary place where he would make contact with 95, 96 mile an hour fastballs. And then of the off-speed pitches, the majority of them were in an area that would pop legitimately way out to where he could see them, recognize them super early. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that would happen would be change-ups or split fingers that looked like fastballs but ended up in about that 90 speed range, kind of middle. So if you just think about that swing as robotic, so it enters the zone at 92 away and down, and then it comes up through the zone so that it would hit middle pitches at about 89, and then it would hit pitches that were at EV 86 on the inside part of the plate and up. So if I were to throw 3 pitches, 96 down and away, kind of 89 split finger, middle, and throw a slider at 80, whatever I said, I can't remember, 86, ended up 86 EV inside. All three of those would run into his bat. If I were a pitcher and I tried to hit those locations and the bat was geared to that speed, I would have a very difficult time missing the bat. In other words, every pitch I threw was heading right to where the place that he was heading if I threw him at those speeds. And so when you go back and you look at the home runs that he hit, they're literally falling into those categories at a really high percentage. So the second those pitches go away and the target-rich environment is not so rich anymore, it's a very different story. And that's what's taken place to a large degree is the target-rich environment is starting to go away. And when it goes away all throughout baseball, it's going to be a very interesting thing to see what happens with all the theoretical swings that are out there. I'm looking forward to that, actually.
We both are, Perry. Yeah, because there's no adjustability.
One of the other things about Carlos this year, one is he hit a bomb every 8.5 at bat during that period. And if you think about that, I mean, that's better than Babe Ruth hitting one every 10. I mean, that's his lifetime. Yeah. So that's pretty impressive. But during that period, he hit a bomb every 8.5 at bat. And so he gave up zero. He gained power. He didn't lose it. And the one other thing that happened to him was he was at about 20% chase rate, which is right around where his bottom is at. And when we were finished for that period of time, his chase rate actually went down to 18%. Wow. So not only did the power go up, the strikeouts went down, average went up, but the zone control actually got better. Because when you know exactly what you want to hit, you also know exactly what you don't want to hit. And the only thing that we didn't get really worked out was the physical part of him releasing off the backside better. It was something he struggled with throughout. And changing that is really, really difficult once you get to a certain level. Right. It's like a 3 or 4 month just all in, all 100% focused endeavor to try to make a change like that when you've been doing it your whole life. Right.
Well, Perry, I think we should probably wrap it up. I know we started a little late, but my time here on the video is getting close to 60 minutes, so I'm trying to keep these to about 60 minutes. And I know you're a busy guy too. So I'd like to do this at the end of each show, just because we got some new people that come on. So where can we find you? Any promos or discounts or anything like that?
I set one up last time. If they're interested in any of the online courses, only for the online courses, but the video courses. But there's a 25% discount if you use EB25.
EB25. Go ahead.
If for some reason I didn't check that today to see if the expiration date was still good. If it's not, just email me at perryhusband@gmail.com and I'll reset that.
Okay, so I'm going to put your website in the chat here. So here's Hitting as a Guest. This is Perry's site, and then coupon code is EV25. So that's that. And then I have one for you guys. Actually, just sent the email today. If you guys have my email, free plus shipping book. The book again it's free, but just paying the shipping and handling, which is $8.95. Which I only make probably 50 cents to 75 cents on that. So I'm not making a lot on the book. Let me get this in here so I don't have to do two things at once. So here's the link to that. So that is on Amazon. If you get that on Amazon, the book is $19.97. Some of you might have already bought that on Amazon, so I'm sorry. But it's a print. It's for the print of the catapult loading system, and you'll also get the free online video mini course, the Power Hitter 2.0 Engineering the Alpha, free. So you'll get that instantly. So while you wait for your book, you can go through the Power Hitter 2.0. And then there's some other things if you want to pay for extra things. There's like, I think for $20 you can upgrade the order to, I think it's the line drive hitter 2.0, engineering the alpha. And then there's like the $1 14-day trial of the War Room Lite, which is all the little essential courses that are a little bit more bite-sized. But then you can go there. You can just buy the book, get the book, shipping and handling, and you're good to go. So other than that, I think we're good on this one. I want to thank everybody for showing up and putting up with Perry and I. We're going to do this again for at least another 3 more sessions, and I think the next time I'll announce it on Facebook. We might go Zoom like a webinar type thing. It'll be free, same thing as this Facebook, but it's going to allow us to do more. Like you can actually see Perry's face instead of just my ugly bearded face. And we can also screen share, and we can do some cool stuff on Zoom. But I will let you all know, especially Wednesday when I send out the new blog post from last week, our talk from last week. I'll let you know on the Zoom thing. But I think that's going to be a little bit better experience for you guys. So again, you don't have to look at my ugly face. But want to again thank Perry for his time. I know these talks, when we get on talks they're like 2-3 hours. He was on the phone with Taylor Gardner, the Backspin Tee guys, for probably 3 hours. When I jumped in the middle of it. We had a little group discussion. So I know they were already in boiling water. I just jumped in the boiling water. They've been talking for 2 hours already, and then we extended it another hour. So when I always think in my head when we're talking on the phone that I wish you guys could be there, be the fly on the wall. So that's kind of the attempt at this too. So again, I will get the experiment thing for the swinging valves at home. I'll get that out to you on Wednesday with the blog post, and any kind of supporting material. I know Perry mentioned something last talk about kind of a diagram thing. So we'll get all that to you guys so that these talks, instead of us answering questions that I've gotten from readers, which is fine, we can do that. I want to have more of you guys gathering the data at home with your hitter and bringing it to us, and then we can troubleshoot and help the hitter out. So again, thanks for everything. You guys have a good rest of your Friday. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, thanks, Dr. Tom Hansen. We had him on. I didn't tell you that, Perry. The author of Play Big and Heads Up Baseball, Dr. Tom Hansen.
All right.
Yeah, he was on. So
he's the one that introduced me to Carlos, by the way.
Oh, there you go. Matchmaker. Matchmaker. Cool. All right. On that, I will let you all go. For those that are Pacific time, have a good lunch. For those on Eastern time and somewhere in the middle, you guys are kind of past the middle part of the day. So have a good night, good weekend, and we will see you guys next week. Same time, same channel, and or the channel might change, but I'll let you all know that. But it'll be the same time for sure, same day.
And I'll have some video and some data next time for whatever we're discussing.
Cool. All right, Mr. Perry. Thank you, brother.
All right, you too, man. We'll talk soon.
The Hitting Performance Lab wants to know, did you know that you may be losing out on 8 miles per hour of average bat speed because of one commonly taught hitting technique? Have you ever heard the coaching terms, squish the bug, squish out the cigarette butt? Well, we created a free video revealing the results of a scientific study that will show you how we added an average of 8 miles an hour to average bat speed by doing the exact opposite of squishing the bug. Click here now to get the video while it's still free.